Hey, everybody. Welcome to WP Roundtable, episode 124. Happy to be here with you today. My name is Kyle. I am from Jackson, Michigan, and run a small agency called Real Big Marketing. We build WordPress sites. And today we've got a very special guest with us, Mr. Corey Hammond from A2 Hosting. How you doing today, Corey?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm great. Really excited to be back at home after a long trip. We spent some time together over the weekend at a very special word camp in Philadelphia. I hope you had a good time, just like I did.
Yeah, definitely. Until you ditched me for a better bed.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you understand the circumstances.
I do, yes.
All right. I kind of was feeling bad about that, but hey, if it's a sore subject, I
Get it?
understand.
Sore subject.
All right. Well, before we dive into learning a little bit more about Corey, we're going to cover our quick picks of the week real fast. I've got an article that I thought was pretty good about a couple months back. I went to Ann Arbor and a local news source attended one of the Ann Arbor WordPress meetups. I spent a good deal of time interviewing myself and the Ann Arbor WordPress meetup organizer, Ross Johnson, and a couple other attendees of the meetup, and wrote up a very nice article about WordPress and open source in Ann Arbor. They even did a photo shoot, which I was unable to attend, but they took some great pictures of the Johnsons and Mr. Declan O'Neill, and some of the great people there in Ann Arbor. So it's pretty cool. Just kind of like a tech news source based in Ann Arbor talking about WordPress there. And he did a pretty good job with the article and quoted me many times. So I don't know that it's a self-serving quick pick to share, but I thought it was a kind of fun article. Anyway, Corey, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
No, nothing specific. I think maybe one thing to touch on is just some of the WordCamp US stuff from this previous weekend. That's why we were hanging out. So I thought there was some interesting happenings, some good announcements, mergers and acquisitions, the whole 9 yards.
Excuse me. Yes, that's definitely something I want to spend a good deal of time talking about because having just arrived home from it, it was a pretty intense weekend. A lot of stuff happened, and so I am eager to discuss it. So, first, why don't we spend a little bit of time talking about who you are, Corey? It's your first time on the show, and it's possible there could be a couple people out there, watching now or watching in the future, who don't know who you are. It's possible.
I'm sure
Um,
there's quite a few that don't.
well, I have no idea, really. But for those people who don't really know a lot about Corey Hammond, let's give them the scoop. Let's take a few steps back, set the stage. Take us back to when your career was really just barely getting started in the early days, when you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do with your life, but you had some ambitions. What is it you do that you did at the time to get yourself on track, and what did you originally pursue?
Yeah, definitely. So, out of high school and in college, there were two kind of career paths you could take that seemed to have the most financial gain without finishing a degree, which were cell phone sales and pharmaceutical sales. At the time, pharmaceutical sales kind of switched gears and was slowing down a bit, not kind of in its heyday anymore. So that left cell phone sales, started selling phones, did fairly well, kind of got adept at, spent a lot of time online reading and figuring out how to like hack phones. This was when like your first camera phone and flip phones were coming out. So everything we take for granted today, where you could just download ringtones and wallpapers and that kind of stuff, you actually had to have a data cable, hook it to your computer, and do it old school style. And the software wasn't easy, it was kind of complex, but learned how to do that. And then these guys would share these websites about, oh, I started a ringtone website or a wallpaper website. And I didn't really pay attention to the fact that they were making money hand over fist in affiliate marketing and through AdSense and other things. I was paying attention to them gaming the search engines. They would share articles about At the time, it was like a lot of old school stuff, hiding text, keyword stuffing, and that kind of thing to boost their rankings. And I just thought it was so fascinating, these guys out trying to game these search engines. Started reading about it. It was more like a hobby as I sold phones. Uh, Ended up a client came in, and I always like to try to find out like what people did for a living. And so I asked her what she did, and she's like, "Oh, and I'm an accountant for an SEO firm." And I'm like, I started laughing. I was like, "Oh, that's kind of funny. I thought they only did that like on the West Coast in California." And she's like, "No, we've got a decent sized agency. I'm in the Cleveland area of Ohio." So she's like, "Yeah, we have an agency." Long story short, ended up kind of getting me into that agency to do online marketing, kind of entry level. And from there really kind of developed my skill sets in a lot of different aspects. But my bread and butter and my original background was in organic search engine optimization. um, got into hosting a little over 6 years ago in 2010. Then wanted to get out of the agency space, was kind of burnt out with doing client accounts and the lack of them wanting to implement and move fast enough. So got out, started a hosting company, and have really been in hosting ever since.
All right. That's pretty cool. So what role did your education play in this, in your career?
Um, Education's kind of twofold. I guess you could say my formal education, not a lot, self education, everything.
Right on.
So
It's,
I
it's,
only I only went to about a year and a half of college, and then decided my time was more apt to continue in the regular workplace. But my education has really never stopped.
sure. It's certainly something that I'm curious about. Having interviewed so many guests on the show, just listening to who invested in higher education and what they studied is has been consistently interesting to me. But anyway, let's talk about that hosting company that you got started. Your first dive into entrepreneurship. Did you do that alone? Did you go solo?
Nope, I had partners. Originally, when we got together, we weren't originally going to start a hosting company. We had some other things. They brought me on board to join them because I had the organic viability to build a long-standing property. They came heavy from the affiliate space and paid advertising world. A lot of what they did at the time was called like churn and burn, where they'd put up a site, they'd run a lot of traffic to it. It would get banned or burned out, and then they'd relaunch a different brand and keep going. And while that can generate cash, it's not really long standing or long term. And they got tired of doing the churn and burn and wanted to move into some traditional businesses. And so we kind of all got together, and through that process started a hosting company.
That's fascinating. So you started a hosting company with some partners. You did that for a few years. And what have been some of the big milestones since then?
Yeah, so first hosting company was fairly successful, since this is garnered more towards word space. One of the little known facts that I sometimes am pretty tight-lipped about is I've probably built in excess of about 350,000 WordPress sites. Uh,
Wow.
yep.
That's pretty astounding.
It's a lot of sites.
All right. So, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the business was, our primary traffic source was through affiliate marketing. We had people that were promoting us that had specific audiences that needed a website or a blog as a part of their curriculum of sorts. And so we were the hosting provider, but as a value add, because hosting at the core is fairly boring. It's not a glamorous thing, right? And so, but it's a necessary evil. And so the way to make it less technical and make it more valuable, we were actually building the sites for these people. So someone would come in, say, I've got a passion for woodworking and I'd like to blog about it, we would flush out and build them a woodworking blog. And yes,
Wow.
that's a real niche that people requested more than you would think.
Wow. Woodworking blog. Awesome.
So we
So,
did it at scale. Obviously, these weren't, I mean, they were custom to the end user, to you or I, like you do. You have an agency that does custom development work. We weren't doing designs for every single of these sites. We had for lack of a better phrase, a templated system that had a lot of automation in behind the scenes. These are novice users, so they don't need a fully custom design and those complex things. They just need the bare necessities and the tools to be successful. But as you've seen, if you give someone a blank WordPress, they're kind of stymied, right? They don't know exactly what to do. If they're new, what's it supposed to look like? How's the content look? Where do the images go? How do I edit this? How do I edit that? And so what we did is we had a templated system that pre-built these sites for them, that gave them a real nice springboard that said, okay, this is what your site is supposed to look like. Here's examples of blog posts. Here's your header image. Here's your content and your images and the necessary plugins that you need. And so they essentially, we could turn the keys over to them and they could get off the ground much faster than if they had to build it all themselves.
wow. It sounds like a lot of value to a lot of different customers, especially at the time where that sort of a templated solution was completely adequate for all kinds of use cases. So tell me a little bit more about the evolution of the business and then your eventual um, move to A2.
Yeah, so ended up leaving. We started the company in 2010. Ended up selling my equity at the end of 2012. Took 13 and did some consulting. Had an opportunity. A buddy of mine in the space owned a hosting company that needed some marketing. Joined what was Arvix at the end of 2013. They got acquired about 10 months later by Endurance International, who's the parent company to HostGator and Bluehost and JustHost and a lot of other brands. Um, and so, with my specialty being in independent, high growth hosting companies, working for a giant conglomerate corporation wasn't really my fit. So, I ended up kind of, the industry is fairly small in this day and age through the acquisitions and mergers that have happened. And so, I had a specific type of hosting company I was looking for, one that had a real solid technical base, but really hadn't started leveraging and marketing themselves, and A2 was on that list.
That's great. That's great. So you joined in 2015,
Yep, early 20 early 2015.
and is your role today the same as it was when you started?
It is,
Essentially.
yes.
Can you tell us a little bit what your role is, your focus, and your goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So in charge of all aspects of marketing is the primary focus. With that comes some secondary roles, or I guess maybe you could call them influence. Some of it is product development. So if I see needs and opportunities in the space to continue to build A2's product lineup, I'll work and spearhead some of those initiatives. Uh, and then a lot is on the back end business and the operational side, because if I'm acquiring customers in the hosting space, it's expensive to acquire those customers. I want to keep those customers. And so there's a lot of overlap in some cases with like making sure my customer service department and my support staff and technical staff is structured and allowing the entire business to scale and grow.
So, for those maybe who don't know, because anybody watching, I'm sure, has a hosting account somewhere. Maybe they've heard of A2 hosting, maybe they haven't, but we all have hosting, and we all have an opinion on hosting. And so maybe you could spend just a minute telling us a little bit about what sets A2 hosting apart, why A2 is special or unique, and maybe warrants a look for those who haven't come across it yet.
Yeah, really, in this day and age, you have to have some differentiators. I think one of our biggest ones is definitely on the performance side of things. I would say maybe we're the only, if not one of a few, that actually have our own plugin in the repository. Ours, the A2 optimized, which actually does performance and security. It's more of a one-click solution. If any of the audience has used like a W3 Total Cache or any other caching plugin, they can be kind of daunting with all the configurations and steps that you have to do to get them to work. And a lot of people break sites trying to implement them because of their very technical nature. And so we tried to take a lot of security and performance aspects and put them all together in a plugin that is kind of a one-click set it and done. That the unique thing about it is the plugin works in other people's environments. So someone running a competitor's hosting account can use it. But where it gets really powerful is with some of our environment, it does go above and beyond with some of the caching types that can be deployed. That's probably the big thing, one of the big areas that we focus on. But also in this day and age, support is such a big key component to hosting. And we've done a lot over the last year to really improve and scale and continue to offer and deliver real high value there as well.
Super cool. Super cool. If you don't mind, could we talk tech just a little bit? Because we might have viewers and myself as well is pretty interested in a lot of the tech behind hosting companies. So
Yeah, if you get too technical, I'll just have to refrain. It's just not my bread and butter being the marketing vibe guy, but we can go as far as we can.
it's not likely that I'm going to go more technical than you can. It's not my area of expertise as well.
You
But
code, so you're much more technical than me.
yeah, not as much as I'd like to, honestly. But yeah, I want to know. Can you tell us a little bit about the infrastructure that A2 runs on? What's special about it? What do you appreciate about? What do your customers appreciate about it? Some of the uh, right down to the racks and everything. Just describe it for us.
Yeah, definitely. Some differentiators about that and how we're set up is up until actually about 2 to 3 weeks ago, we've been 100% Linux based. We actually just launched, kind of soft launched. I guess this is the first time it's being talked about publicly, but we did soft launch a Windows line. The Windows is predominantly just shared right now, but bread and butter up to this point has been Linux based, full offering. So your traditional shared hosting, um, a basic cloud offering, VPS, and dedicated, and then a reseller package as well. The difference with our shared is how we structure it. So we've got three plans: Light, Swift, and Turbo. Turbo is actually on its own for its own environment, completely separate than Light and Swift, and it's got pre-built performance in it. Less density plus a bunch of technology aspects that handle caching and a handful of other things out of the box. And so from a WordPress standpoint, our Turbo product, our Light and Swift packages are definitely normally, we try to put a lot of emphasis on the performance, and they typically perform better in tests than our competitors. Turbo, though, by far goes even faster. It's a step above and beyond that. And so um, yeah, that's kind of a big positioning thing for the WordPress side. Our Turbo actually can run a WordPress site in some cases without you actually optimizing a VPS faster than your own VPS.
That's pretty cool. How about a little bit about the company, just for perspective and to understand what A2 is all about?
Yeah,
Um,
founded in 2003, so we've been around for a long time, not just a startup or anything. Nothing against a startup, but some age is good. Based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but we've got three data centers across the globe, one in Michigan, one in Singapore, and the other in Amsterdam. So we've got some global coverage and looking to kind of expand that footprint as time goes on. One other thing that differentiates us is we actually buy all of our own hardware, all the equipment, all the servers, which is unique. Some shared hosting companies will just rent or lease equipment and have a data center partner. We have a data center partners that we also partner with, but we actually buy all of our own equipment so we can have more granular control over the configurations and whatnot.
Since you've been a part of the company, what have you seen in terms of growth on the customer base side and also as um, the team?
Yeah, both things have grown. I think I mentioned with support, we had some needs to put some structure in place to be able to scale as the marketing scales. I can only go as fast as my support allows me in a lot of cases. I can't bring in a bunch of customers and then not be able to support them. That doesn't do anyone any good. So we've done a lot of house cleaning, gotten ourselves in a real good position support wise, and marketing is obviously, we have a lot of fundamentals put in place and are continuing to grow that into 2017.
How big is the team these days?
Pushing close to 70 people now, I think. So
That's pretty
good
big.
growth. I think I was just shy of employee 50-ish. I was in the 40s somewhere. And so uh, pretty decent growth so far, just in a year and a half or so.
Looking ahead to the future, with respect to your specific responsibilities and your focuses, in a couple years from now, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what would have to occur, or what would be the situation for you to look back and say, I succeeded at whatever I set out to do? What would that look like?
That's a great question. I mean, hosting companies have a fair amount of opportunities in this this day and age. Some companies get acquired, some companies just continue to grow. With us, where we're positioned and the size that we're growing, we're really looking to continue to grow and acquire more customers. And so success is really just improving things overall in the product line and continuing to deliver the value that we has been always kind of an A2 philosophy, but adding to it. I think I mentioned we deployed Windows, which is not something everyone goes into in this day and age, but we saw opportunities. And so Windows hopefully will continue to expand from shared. We'll add reseller shortly, as well as VPS and hopefully dedicated down the line. And then continuing to look at the landscape and find opportunities and white space and capitalize on it.
Cool. Let's see. So I want to talk a little more about like the WordCamp space. Actually, you've been involved a lot in the WordPress community. You sponsor some WordCamps, you sponsor some meetups, um, and I've attended a lot of events where I bumped into you. So, what does the WordPress world mean to A2 hosting, and especially what do WordPress events mean to A2 hosting?
Yeah, that's a great topic, really. My philosophy has always been A2 is never going to be a WordPress only host or a solely managed WordPress host. We find too much value in being a kind of what I dub as like a holistic host or a traditional host where we'll host anyone and everything. We like to have our customers have the freedom to do what they want, obviously within means, but we don't accept phishing sites and that kind of thing. But we do want people to be able to come in and use software like WordPress to the best that they can, and obviously have us support it to the best that we can, so everyone can succeed. So WordPress, I mean, we saw the stats at WordCamp US. They're publishing every 10th of a percentage point. So WordPress controlling 27.2% or whatnot of the internet. These controlling, meaning powering with their software, sites running it. It's a big market, right? You have to kind of pay attention to it. And in the last year and a half since I joined A2, the being more involved in the community is much more important to us. I think we know we have a good quality product that performs really well and our customers like it. And so it's really trying to get into the community and help them and show them what we're all about.
For people in a position kind of like yours, I now and then have guests who aren't so completely immersed in everything WordPress the way that myself and a lot of us, the rest of us, are. I always like to ask questions about perspective, looking at WordPress with respect to other communities, other customer bases that you may have. What comments do you just have, generally speaking, about WordPress customers, this whole WordPress community, and just this segment of your customer base with respect to all the others?
Yeah, it's an interesting watching it. Like I said, I think we get a little deeper perspective because we're not solely focused in WordPress, right? We're doing things in other CMSs like Drupal and Joomla, which are pretty good open source projects. But then we also do a ton on the open source e-commerce side. So the Magento, OpenCart, PrestaShop side of the house. So we definitely see a lot of things, and we get a lot of good perspectives because we have partnerships and in a lot we work very closely with these, and in some cases have partnerships with the open source project itself. And so yeah, it's WordPress as a whole is really interesting, obviously because it's of its sheer size and popularity. The changes that the community seems to be trying to make, um, the involvement seems to be more cohesive in the WordPress space than others. I mean, there's just such a thriving ecosystem for theme developers and plugin developers and agencies and support services. There's these, if you call WordPress an ecosystem, there's even mini ecosystems that have sprung out as a part of it and continue to develop and mold as time goes on. So, because of WordPress's size, an interesting perspective seeing it and comparing it to those other projects.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's pretty cool commentary. I think. Um, Anyway, when it comes to this past weekend, we just got back from WordCamp US. It was a huge event by WordCamp standards. Um, and I was hoping maybe we could just start that topic with some comments from you about maybe what you thought the highlights were.
Yeah, for me, I'm always trying to look for things. We're obviously there for our own business, right? So some of the things, maybe the highlight takeaways for me were some of the things that came out of the state of the word, right? So WordPress, for lack of a better, they're trying to really put it under the guise of making adjustments and changes to the theme customizer and the editor, which to me sounds like and translate to WordPress wanting to get heavier and potentially have a website builder, a page builder. Um, I think they're feeling a lot of, I don't know about a lot, but I think they're feeling some pressure from the outside. You've got Squarespace and Wix and Weebly, and actually those were mentioned by name in Matt's talk, that have been gaining a lot of market share. And I think WordPress sees that those are very active, very profitable companies gaining market share, and he would like to continue to put WordPress in a position to succeed despite WordPress's popularity, even, which is interesting. I mean, if you know the background of some of those companies, I mean, some of those companies individually are spending $100 million or more a year in advertising against all the other platforms that are out there, including WordPress. So, um, the fact that WordPress is trying to go more mainstream towards the novice entry level user is pretty fascinating to me.
I guess, yeah, that's a cool takeaway. So all about obviously you perked up and started paying close attention when Matt got on stage to provide his commentary on direction for the WordPress platform in the future, and so did all the rest of us. That, but yeah, it is kind of interesting to look at it that way. How some of those other platforms are doing some pretty cool things and seeing success because of it and spending heavily. And I think at the same time, WordPress is identifying what some of the struggles are. Let's look at our users and see where they are, um, struggling, and let's look at other platforms and see what they're doing really well. And so you're right on. That's some of the stuff that Matt talked about. Ease of making a cool site.
Yeah, but it's twofold, right? You have to remember in the community there's not a lot of popularity for these page builders, right? The Divi's and Beaver builders and um, Visual Composer. The very technical crowd doesn't like the page builders, but for a novice user, those page builders are kind of clutch because they allow someone to administer their website without knowing how to code or learning how to code necessarily. Um, but at the same time, if you listen to his state of the word, he's also doing the things that the developers want, right? 4.7 was mentioned to have more API functionality, and through this next year, um, the API will be a core focus on top of that uh, editor and theme customizer. So he's almost trying to ensure he keeps both sides of the fence very happy. Let's get the developers their fancy uh, JavaScript, whatnot, and API functionality and improve performance there. But let's also go more mainstream how we can make WordPress even easier to use.
Right. Right. Difficult things to do, definitely. And you can easily look around at other platforms out there and see some that are maybe leaning more heavily on one of those sides, investing much more heavily in just a beginner user experience, or investing much more heavily in being developer friendly. And WordPress is definitely trying hard to please everyone, I guess.
Oh
Design
yeah,
for
I
the
mean,
majority.
when you're powering 27% of the internet, I mean, you've kind of got to capture a large you've already got a large audience, but if you want to continue keeping that growth rate and that trajectory, you've got to keep innovating and doing things that keep things moving in that direction. And I think it's a real smart positioning. Let's continue getting the developer features and the developer functionality to ensure performance and scalability is there, but let's go more mainstream than WordPress has probably gone to and catered to typically. And let's go straight up after that entry level market or small business owner. It's I'm very interested to see how things flush out over the next year or so. And I don't even know if we can say even the next year, or maybe it's even the next 2 years, because there's no set release cycle this year, right? Um,
Right.
there's no end date. There wasn't a hard deadline that says by the end of 2017 we have to have uh, a a page builder of sorts with the theme customizer and new editor. Um, there wasn't a deadline put, so it's kind of a little open ended right now. So it'll be interesting to see the timetable and how things flush out.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are interested in how this 2017 release plan is going to work out. It's a little bit different. Matt stated very clearly he believes that what got us here won't get us there. And so this is an area he's decided to change. And
Yeah, I'm interested as well. I think the one thing people maybe are overlacking is maybe there's going to be faster releases, smaller releases. When things are big enough or ready enough to ship, maybe things are going to ship quicker. Um, not waiting for these monumentous updates to roll out, but smaller, quicker things that can be deployed and done. Um, I don't know. Maybe that will make things leaner and more efficient and quicker. Um, we'll see what happens.
it is fascinating. I mean, one of the WordPress core values is deadlines are not arbitrary. And this has always been an important differentiator between the WordPress release cycle when you compare it to other open source projects, which do take as long as it takes to get it right. WordPress is a lot more focused on frequent iterations. Um, so this is kind of a divergence for sure. And none of us know where this is going to go. I'm curious about your thoughts on some of the other things that were brought up. WordPress is extremely committed to backwards compatibility, and there's like you from the hosting perspective. I would love to have your comments on issues like all that PHP stuff. We heard
All the
about
PHP stuff.
we
Yeah,
heard
it's
about the bumping of the required numbers. I mean, and
yeah. I
recommended
think
numbers.
from a hosting perspective, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like we're at the whims of our customer base to some degree on what they're running. Heavily developed WordPress sites that have heavy customization and stuff could be running things in older versions. I think the core most popular version is like 5.6.2 maybe. Um, and the new version with 7, obviously the performance gains are there, but not everything runs on 7. Our hosting environment definitely is able to run 7, but from what we've seen is it takes that developer level caliber person to be able to get WordPress to fully work in it. And it's a case by case scenario. Not every site's the same. Certain plugins aren't PHP 7 compatible yet. So it's this delicate balance of wanting to push into PHP 7 purely for performance gains when WordPress as a whole isn't ready for it, I guess. Just because core can run 7 doesn't mean the plugins and the themes are there yet. Um, I think that's the biggest issue and the biggest thing holding things back. But all the demands feel like they're being put on the hosting companies, right? The stats that they show you of how many sites are running these different versions of PHP. At the end of the day, they point fingers at the hosting companies and say maybe it's your fault that these sites aren't running the newer versions. But for me, I support 7. Someone can migrate their stuff to PHP 7. But like I said, it typically is someone like you that's more technical that can actually stage their site in a PHP 7 environment and get everything fixed to actually make it work. Versus, I guarantee you there's a very slim percentage of SMBs that are moving their sites to PHP 7 purely because there's things on their site that don't 100% work yet.
Sure. When it comes to the Q&A at the which takes place every year after the State of the Word, Matt fields questions from the audience. Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything interesting that anybody stood up to ask about, or maybe didn't ask about?
Not really. Maybe me personally, I always feel like a little bit of guilt. Last year and this year were my first WordCamp USs. Maybe some apprehensiveness to ask bolder questions. Um, the WordPress community has a certain vibe and a certain whatnot, and uh, sometimes sticking your neck out there isn't the best thing, especially when you're asking the question to Matt Mullenweg. As diplomatic as his answers are, sometimes my personal opinions, I don't want my personal opinions affecting my company's brand. So I don't know. I think I would have asked more about a deadline, about the theme customizer and editor. I would have liked to that there would have been more specific, whatever that word is. I would have liked more detail on a deadline, like we talked about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's open ended right now, but let's be frank, WordPress, I don't think can afford to spend 2 years launching a theme customizer that competes with a Wix or a Weebly's page builder, right?
Right.
So more deadline uh, talk, I think would have been my question. When do we realistically see those changes? Because it's a huge shift, right? If you're thinking about, for those that have used like a Divi or a Beaver Builder or whatever frameworks there are, rolling is the goal to roll that kind of functionality into the theme customizer, because that can't be an easy thing to do, especially for the reverse compatibility and for the core I mean, those things exist because themes have been inflexible and haven't been able to do that, right? So now you're talking about theme development completely taking a pretty good change to how themes are developed and the structure that they have to allow for this new customizer. Um, and so then I think you mentioned it, backwards compatibility. Obviously, there's the PHP version and the hosting side of it, but what about WordPress as a whole? I have a I have a theme that is not uh, theme customizer or editor friendly, but now the editor and theme customizer have all this advanced functionality. I'm probably waiting for my theme company to upgrade my plugin, and they will upgrade my theme or plugins to be able to handle this new functionality for the theme customizer and ensure that the reverse compatibility is there.
You're right.
I mean, if you've, and this is where some things are interesting. If you watch, so Drupal actually just made this kind of change. They don't have I wouldn't consider their back end where they have a theme customizer necessarily, but Drupal 8 shipped with a lot of different features over Drupal 7. And it was not reverse compatible purely because it was incapable of it, because they needed to shift and they needed to change so much about the core structure of Drupal. And I don't know the technical aspects, right? But obviously working closely with the CMS and being a partner of theirs, there were so many changes that had to happen in the release of Drupal 8, and the release of Drupal 8 took years to do because they had to take such big pivots and switches, that it was not reverse capable. And so WordPress has always been, for the most part, reverse capable. And so it will be interesting to see with these huge changes that have not just implications to core, but also affect the themes and the plugins.
Wow. Right. Any other highlights from the event?
I mean, we could talk about Pantheon getting kicked out of the conference, but I think Post Status did a good write up on that one.
Pretty much. I read it, and that was about all I know, all
Again,
that I heard of the rumors that flew
their
around.
neck out of it, doing something not very norm in the WordPress space and kind of getting their hand slapped for it. Obviously, we
Absolutely.
don't know the full picture of what caused their hand to get smacked so violently, but um,
I guess
obviously there was enough that happened to warrant it, if I guess to WordPress at least, automatic.
as a sponsor of a decent number of events, what message do you take away from this? Does this affect or change your perspective anyway? Does it give you a pause?
No, it doesn't really change anything, always because we've been cautious, right? That's why we've kind of waited. Like we didn't have a booth at WordCamp US. We've not been a sponsor of WordCamp US in any form or fashion yet, outside of attending and kind of supporting the community from that regards. Team members of mine have spoke at WordCamp US. I think maybe I'll have to check that one. But anyways, we've waded into it kind of slow and apprehensively because there are more rules to follow. Um, and there's a community that has a very set thought on how things need to be handled. And we, A2, and predominantly because of my background, I mean, my marketing style can be more aggressive. Um, and so in the WordPress space specifically, maybe we felt we've tempered that a little bit just to make sure that we're keeping community at the forefront, and playing by some of the rules that are set in place.
Cool.
I made a
Yeah.
joke. I don't know if you were there. I made a joke that it was interesting to see what happened to Pantheon, because I would have been that guy that would have gone through a loophole and done something, and then I would have been the guy to get my hand smacked, right? So not, I take that back. I don't know what, we don't know what officially got their hand smacked. I don't think it was just the act of getting the sponsorship with the hotel with the Sheridan. Um, but I thought it was clever, right? It wasn't part of the WordCamp offering. They were looking to get extra exposure for the investment. I think the number I saw was they spent $100,000 to be the premier WordCamp US sponsor. That's a lot of money to put out and to advertise with. Um, and they were looking to get more leverage for it. So the I've been to hosting conferences, hosting cons specifically that has done hotel packages like that, but the hotel package wasn't part of the WordCamp offering, and so they kind of went outside the lines a bit and got creative. Um, I thought it was interesting that they did it. I mean, I got off the plane when I first landed in Philly and popped my phone up. I saw, I don't know, three, four, half a dozen pictures of the Sheridan, people taking pictures because Pantheon had their advertising on the elevators and whatnot. I thought that was creative and clever. Unfortunately, the organization, the foundation, felt that they were playing out of the lines too far, and something happened, and they disagreed.
With the regarding other types of events, do you do you feel like WordCamps are in some way kind of unique, uh, kind of different? Like, yeah, we've sponsored lots of events, and a company like Pantheon, we sponsor all kinds of conferences, and we do all kinds of trade shows and whatever else. But these WordCamp things, they're a little bit different. And if so, how?
A little bit. Um, I don't know. I mean, contributor day is something different that not everyone does. I think that's unique to kind of an open source thing. In other conferences, I think they do more like hackathon style stuff, but it's not, those are aimed at, I think, a different goal where WordPress through contributor day is meant to improve the open source software. Um, but overall, it's kind of they kind of run the similar lines. I mean, Drupal has DrupalCon and Joomla has World Conference. Um, they have speakers and sessions and exhibit halls. So, I mean, it's a little different, but similar all in the regards. I think the one thing is WordPress is still evolving and growing in the trade show space, so to speak, that traditional medium, since it's not, I mean, we're all online people, right? So trade shows are maybe a newer medium for us to explore. And I think that's where you get things like with the Pantheon situation. WordPress didn't have a hotel sponsorship, maybe because they thought no one wanted to sponsor the the designated hotel, right? Where in other trade shows, that's kind of like par for the course.
Sure,
I
sure.
bet they have a sponsorship package for the hotel next year, though, officially.
How interesting would that be?
Yeah, I mean, some have gone as far as if they're some people will even sponsor taxis. So like in New York City, people would, the little things on the taxis or the on the sides of buses, people, if the conference is big enough, people have been known to do those kinds of advertising things.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we're just maybe a little newer to the space on the traditional conference side of things. We've done, not that we've done these just new, like WordCamps, and have been around for a very long time, since like the beginning, but it's now a fully evolved commercial enterprise happening, or whatever you want to call it. So it's not, I mean, 3,000 attendees or whatever it was. I mean, it's no small potatoes. So
Right on. What are you when you attend an event like that? Um, Apart from just generally trying to share, especially when you sponsor an event, apart from trying to spread the word about the A2 brand, what sort of things are you looking for to learn, people to meet, experiences to have? What are some of your personal goals when you go out to attend a conference of any kind?
yeah, I think I'm always looking to kind of keep a one thing behind in the back of my mind, at least, is always to keep a pulse. what's happening in the space, changes in the space, new developments, mergers and acquisitions are interesting. I think, as we've seen as of late, the hosting space has not been um, it's not uncommon in the hosting space, especially if you look at the last 5-6 years. Mergers and acquisitions happen fairly regularly and still happening to this day and age. But now you're seeing more of that happen in the WordPress space, right? It was just announced today. I think, what is it? WP Curve got bought by GoDaddy. WP Curve, it seems like they're like a WordPress services company. They got bought by GoDaddy. WP Builder, or WP Beaver, has a partnership with GoDaddy. Um, Liquid Web, with some of their changes, selling off their shared hosting customer base, buying a site product, a hosted site solution from Rackspace. Um, yeah, it seems to be that there's some consolidation happening in the WordPress space, which will be interesting to see how that affects the entire ecosystem with theme and plugin companies and their evolution. Right now, it will be interesting to see. So I'm always looking to see what's happening in the space, but I think the main thing is just relationships. Continuing to build existing ones, finding new ones is equally as important for us and for me personally. The learning aspect kind of gets pushed behind the background. I don't typically go to a trade show type event looking to go to the sessions, unless it's the hallway track.
Sure, sure. From an agency perspective, the hosting space is interesting. When all the rest of the people I know that are not in hosting, we always remark about how hosting is like it's the one segment of our industry that is hyper competitive, or everything else, it doesn't seem to be to the same degree. I mean, the hosting companies are the ones fighting to differentiate themselves, and
Right now, yeah, I mean, right now they are, but also some of them have been around for a long time, and I guess because of their age have more money to spend. I mean, GoDaddy's not a small company, and their sister brand, Media Temple, DreamHost, which didn't have a booth this year, but they exhibited last year. They've been around for a long time. Some of these managed WordPress hosts are the new guys to the space, so to speak, but even they've grown out of demands because the traditional hosting companies weren't servicing needs on the higher end, middle to higher end of hosting. So the plugin and theme space isn't ultra competitive yet, but I mean, Envato's big and they represent tons of independent publishers. Um, the page builder space seems to be getting to be the biggest. I mean, Divi's made a lot of changes. I spent some time with their team at WordCamp US. WP Beaver, obviously, with their GoDaddy partnership, has propelled them into the spotlight. Bold Grid, which is actually being spun out of a hosting company, but trying to tackle that same thing. The page builder space, those are getting hyper competitive, it seems, more and more.
right. Yeah, I think you're right to some degree, for sure. It's um, as a lot of these other products are maturing, we're seeing security services and backup solutions and forms plugins and stuff, and now there are a lot of very established players, and each of those, there's new businesses trying to disrupt and dethrone the established brand. But still, for most of us, we're not feeling too much in terms of competition. Just make a good product, offer good service, and we'll get enough businesses to sustain ourselves. But we're just micro businesses by comparison, I'm sure. Anyway, time's really flying by, so we're getting pretty much close to our hour here, and I want to be respectful of your time. So, a few kind of final wrap up questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you do when you're not working? Personal time.
Family's a big focus. Wife and 3 kids, so that takes up a lot of time. Um, Ohio State Buckeye fan. Yes, they're better than Michigan. Those
All right, we're
socks
gonna
you
have to
got
end
hanging
this
are just to
broadcast. I'm
yeah,
sorry, we're having technical
those socks are
difficulties.
just to wipe your tears away.
Oh, Corey, you're making me regret this. Um,
I've been saving that joke since I saw those socks hanging. Just so you know, I've had to contain it for a whole hour now. It's been burning deep in the pit of my stomach, waiting to get it out.
not very gracious of you.
Hey, you decided to go offline and go personal, and the Buckeyes is a big part of who I am and what I like. So
Okay, I'll be civil. I'll be the nice guy here. What sort of things do you like to do in the Cleveland area?
what's interesting? I mean, a lot of it revolves around family stuff. There's a fair amount of good places to eat. I definitely like a good burger, some good wings. So I'm always down for that.
All right. Looking ahead at your calendar, where might people bump into you? I think this year is just about up, but early 2017.
Yeah, nothing for the rest of the year, I don't think. Affiliate Summit probably heading into January. Pressnomics, I think, is on the radar. What is that, April?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, Pressnomics will probably be after that. There may be some, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit myself personally, some of the word camps in between some of those. Um, what's the, totally spacing, what's Ryan Sullivan's conference that might
LoopConf.
get rescheduled? Loop
Loop.
Conf?
Yeah.
Yeah, Loop Conf. I don't know if I don't know if I'll do that one or not, or if someone else from my team will. But those are kind of the immediate things that we're looking at. Affiliate Summit's a big one outside of the WordPress space. Like I said, being a traditional hosting company and having a market we're trying to get to, affiliates are a good traffic source for us, good partners, and so Affiliate Summit in January is on my radar.
You'll decide when you have to. That's the A2 way,
I
right?
think I gotta book it quick here now that it's already December. It feels like this year has flown by.
What are the names of some people that you recommend I have on the show in the future?
Names of people in the WordPress space.
In general, good guests.
Oh, that's a loaded question. I wasn't thinking about that one. I don't know. You've had so many episodes. I should have looked at who you've had so far.
Yeah, you know a lot
Have
of
you had
people.
Chris Lemma?
Not yet.
I think you should have Chris Lemma, especially with his new changes to Liquid Web. That would be an interesting one.
Definitely.
Um, have you had Matt Mullenweg?
No, Matt's not been on the show yet.
Boom! I even beat Matt to the show. You should have Matt Mullenweg on your show. He does podcasts, interviews.
You know, it never crossed my mind. I never even thought about inviting Matt on the show.
See, now 2017, your goal should be to get Matt Mullenweg on your show.
All right, I'll add that to my list of 2017 goals.
Boom. See, I've had some positive influence today.
All right. Well, I appreciate your input, Corey. As we wrap this up, any parting words of wisdom that you would like to share with anybody tuning in? And also, how could they get in touch with you if they wanted to?
Parting wisdom, huh? One philosophy that kind of has come up more and more as of late is there's a book, Who Moved My Cheese? I think it's a universal thing. that talks about change and being willing and opened and accepting change. I think it has universal aspects. If we look at our country, our industry, our family lives, our personal lives, um, I think that's actually been a big philosophy and a thing that we've been discussing internally at A2 with our teams as we grow. And like I said, when I first joined, we were sub 50. Now we're pushing 70 people. That's a pretty big, that's a decent amount of staff to add. So that takes changes in structure and logistics and policies and procedures. And people can sometimes be apprehensive to change. And even growth wise, adding new team members at a high rate, there's always new faces coming on board. So, yeah, change is a good one. And like I said, the book Who Moved My Cheese is a good recommendation. People looking to get a hold of me, Corey Hammond on Twitter. Pretty much if you Google me, you can find me. Corey at a2hosting.com for email. But those are the basics.
Perfect. Well, Corey, I really appreciate your time. It's been a fun discussion. I wish we had more time to talk about a few other topics because we always have great discussions. But that's about all the time we have for this evening, and that's 124, episode 124. So, Corey, thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. I'll bump into you real soon.
Sounds good.